400 years ago, the free town of Nuremberg was already famous in Europe. Centrally located in the midst of the great plain between the Danube and the Rhine, it was advantageously situated at the crossroads of the nations. Founded in the 10th century, it was by the 16th the centre of industry, art and letters, as we have described. God needs all who will come to the table to be artists, to bring their talents, as described in Zechariah, the carpenters building up the building, the temple for God. I believe this is what he's calling people today. We need people who can draw, who can sculpture, who can use the word, who can use music, who are good with different languages. We need all those to be part of the great movement. And the great movement is pointing down to the end of the 2,300 days. To make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness is what it says, as describing that which was given to the Jews but was not accomplished, but comes down to the end of the 2,300 days, in which a great movement was started at that time. Years before, in this city, Nuremberg, October 11, 1414, Huss departed from Constance accompanied by 2 knights who were accompanied by the emperor to protect him from all injury. All along the way, wherever he was stopped, he would post up public notices in Bohemian, in Latin, in German, offering to give to anyone who wished to speak to him on matters of his faith, an account of his religious convictions, and to prove that he was very far from cherishing anything that was like heresy. At Nuremberg, merchants passing through had left word that Huss was on his way and might soon be expected in the city. When he arrived, large bodies of people came out to meet him. Before he had sat down to dinner, a parish priest sent a letter requesting an interview with him, which was granted. During dinner, a note was handed to him, stating that in consequence of the notice that had been posted up, many citizens and masters wished to speak to him. He left the table, met them, and in the presence of many citizens he conversed and he spoke about his faith. There were many who were eager to hear what he had to say, and they were satisfied with what he had to say. However, after all of this, and this would have been given great momentum for that which would follow here at Nuremberg to be a great centre for Protestantism, the emperor's safe conduct for him was not honoured, and he was imprisoned, he was burned at the stake, and Jerome, his close friend, also who followed close behind, he met a more unpleasant end. To make an example of him, because Huss, when he died, it gave impact to the manner in which he met his death, and it only sowed seeds for the Reformation. So Jerome was placed in a dungeon, in a horrible dungeon, for 1 year to break his spirit, and that was accomplished. However, he met a glorious end, as did Huss. We will see him in the kingdom. It says here, quoting the Pope's words, Pope Francis, all of us benefit a great deal from remembering our past. The people which remembers does not repeat past errors. Instead, it looks with confidence to the challenges of the present and of the future. Remembrance saves the people's souls from whatever and whomever would attempt to dominate it or use it for its own interests. Here we have some important words that we need to recognise and remember. First Jesuit Pope, speaking about liberty. He's coming into America. He's speaking into the very country from which many were asylums from the old world, fled from the papacy. Here are the dungeons found below the old town hall. The dungeons are found in the cellar vaults, and they were set up in the 4th century to serve as cells for prisoners awaiting trial or in custody until their execution. They were chambers of torture, the early employment of the Holy Office for the persecution of dissenters and confessors of the Reformed faith. So that's the sort of place they would have taken us to, and Jerome. It says that the books, as described in Daniel 7, the book was opened and the judgment was set. And it describes what happened to that little horn power. It came to an end and was never seen and heard from again. Each of us who take on the name of Christ must come to that judgment. We must have our names cleared before any can enter heaven, before any are raised from the dead to immortal life. Their names come up in the judgment, and angels are there as witness, as is the Father, the Ancient of Days, and the Son. But it describes how that persecuting power that killed many was not excused of its sins, but came to an end. We have this time period, as I mentioned, it's in Daniel 8. Each time a vision is given, the scene changes a little bit, but the angel clearly says what represents what, and we have here the he-goat and the ram. These describe Medo-Persia and Greece. And from this we have that little horn power spoken of again, and the judgment and the 2,300 days, as I mentioned. The whole idea is the salvation of individuals, the people that make up the city that is the bride of Christ. Revelation 12 verse 5 describes his church, and she, that is the woman, the church, brought forth a man-child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron, describing Christ. And her child was caught up to God, as he was at his resurrection, and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness. Note what happened. The true church fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, or years, a day representing a year. A woman represents the church, and so in Revelation 17 it describes the woman as the great whore sitting upon a scarlet-coloured beast, talking about a corrupt church. It's a religious, political church. When you get into politics, it becomes dirty. So Daniel makes the way for this great movement, which is the church, which is triumphant, which makes an end of sin, makes reconciliation for iniquity, and anoints the most holy and brings in everlasting righteousness. This is what the book of Daniel opens us up to as we come to the end of the 2,300 days, or 300 years, 2,300 years. I want to say, where there is great light, the darkness follows. In the West, there has been great light. There has been the Word of God freely there. Opportunities, great opportunities that have been squandered. And where there has been great light, the darkness follows. Darkness is following us at the moment until free speech, in the name of democracy and free speech, is just about gone. This is the point at which we are at. An example of this is Nuremberg. We remember what was described in Daniel 7, all these powers that represent the nations. This is all rolled into one. The little horn is described here. It has the body of a leopard, Greek philosophy. It has the mouth of a lion, speaking great words, and can devour. It is fearsome and has the paw of a bear to grab its victim. And it has 10 horns. And this power, it says, received a deadly wound, but the deadly wound was healed. And this is talking about the time in which we live. And it come up from the sea. And it tells us clearly that the sea represents nations, kindreds, tongues, people. It comes up amongst the peoples that was populated in Europe, Nuremberg in Europe, and the other people that we find in Europe. And so we have in 1929 the Lateran Accord, and the deadly wound was healed. Look up what's said concerning this. You can look it up in Pictures at 13, describing in great detail the time in which we live, particularly what's happened in the last year. Remember what the Pope had said, all of us benefit a great deal from remembering our past. The people which remembers does not repeat past errors, but looks with confidence. Our confidence, we can look if we remember the past, the way God has led us, and people sacrifice their life for us, then we can work in the present and be confident about the future. But if we forget concerning this, then our soul will not be saved. And we will not, if we do not pay attention to these things which we're speaking about here, then the result is that someone will dominate us, as given in the words of the Pope. This is the Second World War scene in Nuremberg. The rallies that were held there in the time of Hitler. A tragedy. Nuremberg was bombed 11 times between September 1944 and April 1945. Here is the scene of conflict, of great light and great darkness. Most devastatingly on January 2, when 1,000 RAF planes all but obliterated the historic centre in 21-minute raid. This was done not because it was Hitler's favourite city, not because of the Nuremberg laws or rallies, but because it was the important industrial and communication centre for Germany. And it said it could never be built again. It was totally obliterated. But, of course, it was built again. And we find that of the old city, that probably, I think they said like 1/3 of it was left, and the rest of it that we see, if you visit that city today, is that which was put back together again. Absolutely amazing. As I said, we find that which happened in the past about to occur in our time. It's been simply put, it speaks of 2 beasts in Revelation 13, and a second beast which comes up out of the earth, out of a sparse area. It has 2 horns like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And it's talking about the most powerful nation in the world that will pay homage to the first beast, which was and which was not, that old Roman power, and it will cause them to accept the mark of the beast, and if they do not, then they will not be able to buy and sell. This is the time in which we live. We need to pay attention to those things which are given for us so simply, for those of us who are so ignorant, but the Word of God can give us wisdom, as it did to those 3 worthies, or 3 friends of Daniel and Daniel himself. It gave them wisdom and skill and knowledge in sciences. We want to have the knowledge of God unto salvation.